Welcome to the PetroPapers podcast. Say that 10 times fast. This is where you get your oil and gas intellectual stimulation by asking the technical questions. I'm Yoga Pradhan, and with me here today I have Jose Silva from Xecta. Today we're going to interview Jose on his career trajectory and learn about what kind of technical contributions he thinks that young professionals ought to make to the community. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for the invite. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, I thought I'd go ahead and get right to it. How'd you get here? Tell us your career story.
Yeah, well, that's a seniors one, and by here is also an interesting one, given that we're living life in the startup land again. So I started as a geophysical engineer back home in Venezuela, but and I did a little bit of that as well with not just the thesis and internships and things like that, but really my first stint into the business was as a field engineer in the Gulf of Mexico, working for back then for Schlumberger in the drilling and measurements portion. And I did that for more than a few years until I found an opportunity with a startup. The name of the company was Xecta, and they were opening. I was based in Louisiana, and they were opening an office in Houston, and they wanted someone with petrotechnical background as well as with field experience to be able to go out and properly serve multiple clients they had in Houston back then. So moved to Houston. I think around 2009, the company got acquired by Schlumberger, so went back to Schlumberger, but more on the digital side. And that started to give me a little bit of the DNA, building up the DNA around the hustling, the entrepreneurship piece, the going in and out into different companies and organizations, and getting Schlumberger alone is a big technology company if you think about it that way. But then going into a very small one and then coming back in gave me quite a few perspectives. With Schlumberger, traveled the world doing because they had just acquired a piece of technology that they wanted us to continue to promote. And then around 2011, I found a great opportunity to join Anadarko Petroleum up in the Woodlands, in Houston, the Woodlands, in their technology organization as a petrophysicist. And I stayed there in those roles through 2014. In 2014, the company hired their first data scientist with an actual statistician background and all that stuff. I think we were just trying to find out what was going to do for us, and it was a great way of us testing the opportunities. And they brought me in as one of other petrotechnic, with someone with a domain background, if you will. There's also reservoir. There's also geoscience and so on and so forth. And then, long story short, that spun off into an entire technology team. Anadarko was acquired in 2019 by Occidental. And then around that time, I was working for the CTO. And we had this whole technology organization built up with a build and buy. We had a very interesting strategy on how to solve pain points internally, but that gave us the opportunity to really try to get access to a lot of different technologies, and effectively after the acquisition, a few other opportunities span out. Xecta is the current one that I'm working in as we speak.
Nice. Well, that divvies really well to the next question as far as what does Xecta do and what projects are you working on now?
Yeah, no, and I'll try to chime in on this one quickly, because one of the things that we found as we were doing this for ourselves is that a lot of the incumbent technologies and what we were finding, especially in the startup ecosystem, is the approach of, hey, let's solve problems for upstream and midstream oil and gas, and let's try to do it on one well at a time and then aim for scale. And it took a while. It was quite I'm not going to say painful, but it was certainly arduous to say the least. And we had a lot of partners. Every single name that you can think of from a technology point of view, we were working with. It was an extremely collaborative environment, which was phenomenal. But then we said, well, what will be the best case scenario? What would be possible? And what we decided to do, I would say, okay, how about we were to solve this as a production optimization problem, but trying to solve it as if every single oil and gas element that flows is connected to the reservoir, and then try to solve that all at once. So sometimes I use the word network optimization or system optimization, but it's effectively imagine that everything's connected, and then you can optimize for whatever variable you want. And that's what Xecta is all about. Since then, that was in 2020. Since then, what we've been doing is really creating a lot of models, and there's a ton of publications that the team keeps putting out on how to continue to push digital engineering in the energy space. It's a truly exciting time for us as it's working, because that's one of the things when you go to a startup, right? You don't really know if you're going to be able to solve the problem in a way that is actually creating a differential. And so far, so great, really.
Awesome. No, that's really amazing of all the different things that you're working about and the big problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's a lot of people in the community that's thinking about how to go out on their own or whether to work for an operator or start working for a service company. But the intent is to make some kind of technical contribution to the community. So what
Yeah.
are some of the pieces of advice that you can give to not just young professionals, but people who are listeners and viewers of this podcast that would like to make technical contributions in the community?
Yeah, and I'll answer this from a pretty. I'll approach it from a humble perspective. It's probably I'm one of the ones in the company that is not in a publication, for example. So I'll say I used to consider myself technical, but compared to where the team is at today, I'm probably the least technical person in the team. But what I've found is that over the years, the type of contributions that whether you're very technical and you're very passionate around a domain piece and you want to continue your research in that, there's a huge space and there's so much roadmap and need for those professionals. That is, I'm baffled at how much this industry still can grow in that part. On the other side, if you're thinking about, well, if I'm not the best one there, my vocation is not taking me in that direction, the other pieces are around implementation, execution, change management, the ease of use of a lot of these different applications. How do they get to value? The business aspect on how can something, a change or a paper or something that inspires me to go ahead and make a change in the field actually makes it to the P&L of the organization at some point, right? So there's the great thing about our industry, I think, is that regardless of we all have oil and gas background or some sort of energy angle to it, but there's so much space for us to add value, especially for young professionals or individuals that just want to go out. There's a lot of room for improvement in everything that we're doing, not just on the technical side, but as well on implementation, project management, and how much the value then is captured and measured on a continuous basis.
Well, thank you for sharing those opportunities and just broadening the scope of what kind of contributions young professionals and listeners to this podcast can make. I think that's really important to hear. There's one more question I wanted to ask you before I let you go, and that would be, what motivates you to solve oil and gas problems?
Oh yeah, no, that's I think it's an easy one, but it's kind of what gets you out of the bed every day. Is energy is extremely important, no matter what, right? So it's always going to be on the table to solve something, to be part of an industry that adds so much value to people, it touches so many other 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 industries and how it affects society. It's the right industry to be in. And then, as I mentioned just now, it's with what angle is there's so many spaces to add value that it really gives you back in the context of satisfaction. Once you can solve for something, and once you can find a way to grow, if you have that no pun intended, but if you have the energy to go after a lot of these things, there's so much that you can still dream of and get to. It just requires a lot of hard work, which this industry is really known for.
Awesome. No, I appreciate the pun. Well, thank you so much, Jose. Those were all the questions that I had for you for today.
Well, thank you very much again for the invitation.
All right, listeners and viewers, be sure to listen to the podcast and learn more about Xecta. I'll put the website for Xecta below, as well as a couple publications that they've published so far. And be sure to reach out to Jose if you have any questions for him regarding Xecta and what they could do for you. I'm Yoga
No.
Shipadan. This is PetroPapers, and we're signing off.
Bye.